Chris, it is awesome to see you. We finally had a chance to meet in person at Scott Ingram's event in October in Austin. I think it was October. It was October or November, but we had a chance to meet with each other late last year. It's awesome to see you again. You did something that I've never seen at an event. You and Jack Wilson took us on an excursion, an expedition. We went to the top of Everest. I don't know that my lungs have recovered from the fake snow that happened when we were walking up the stairs, but it was awesome.
When anyone goes to an event, typically, and people that go to them often, they can script them out in their head. They already know what's coming. There's going to be a panel. There'll be a speaker. We'll have breakouts. We'll do cocktail. My opinion is, how can I disrupt that? How can I deal some dopamine? I don't want you to have to pick up your phone. And so, as corny as it might be, my opinion is we can craft a really great story around an immersive experience, regardless of how silly or corny or what it is. I remember growing up, we played the telephone game, and they would use that to talk about clarity of message. Now, the telephone game's corny, but they are able to give us a really good lesson that we're able to then transport us back to that moment. And so, I think the goal was, how do we touch every sense that someone has? And so Jack and I went into character and we played it up, and I think we owned it, which is what then made everyone else say, all right, I'll buy in. And, to your point, we have dialed back the snow, but I promise it wasn't toxic. So you're okay.
I'm an introvert. I don't like having to be directed around a bunch of things. You went through this process of kind of sorting and organizing people by handing out specific colored carabiners. I still have my carabiner. I use it. I ended up picking up one from Jeff Bajora because he said he was never going to use it again. So the thing about it that I think is absolutely awesome is we're still talking about it today, 4 months later. I remember the experience. Yeah. I remember the experience. I remember the engagement. I remember what happened in each of these individual rooms as you engage in part of the story and you start challenging your thinking around an idea, which even included promoting other people's products inside the event. So really, really powerful. It was a really, really powerful experience. It was different than anything that I had ever experienced at an event. And I've been to a number of events. So nice work.
Thanks, man. I appreciate it. I really am thankful you said the introvert thing. We're actually working on a current event, and that's what I was told. Look, it's going to be a lot of introvert tech founders. And I said, yeah, I think with introverts, you've got to create shared experience at the event, because then they have something to talk about and they don't have to talk about themselves. And so I think, whether right now or in the future, I'd love to hear if you're in agreement of that it's difficult for an introvert to kind of small talk, come up with their own story. But if you create a shared experience, now we have something automatically we're aligned to say, this is funny, this is corny, oh, that product's cool. Or, oh, I got a card in my hand that prompts me to talk about something and you do too. Would you kind of agree with that?
Yeah. So for me, it's less about talking about myself. Like the biggest challenge I run into, and people will notice this when they go to events that I'm at, is I will cling on to people. And if you end up being the person that I'm the hanger on fish on, because I've identified someone that I was able to connect with, that I was able to have a comfortable conversation with, that I didn't feel that I got some really good nonverbal feedback from, where I felt like we were engaged in discussion and I don't feel like I'm going to be interrupting them the next time I see them. The challenge I run into in these events and why I choose to go to smaller events is I never want to be the person who's going and interrupting somebody inside their space. So creating those opportunities to engage with others where you're not interrupting where it's all part of the process, I think is really powerful. So it's less for me anyhow about talking about the things that are interesting to me or engaging with people who I think are interesting and being able to ask questions. It's like my, I don't know if a crutch because I think it's in some instances, I think it's a gift. There are other people who would say it's not a gift, but my ability to ask questions on the fly comes from me not necessarily wanting to be the center of attention or having to really lean on being the person sharing a lot of information. So that's how I would answer that. I don't know if that's helpful.
Yeah, that's very helpful. It's probably why the company that you run's Catalyst, because a catalyst makes a bigger reaction, and that's what you do with the questions you ask.
It's pretty powerful stuff. So let's talk about story and what you did just there and connecting the dots between something that either some people know of, and a lot of people use the word catalyst these days. Maybe people may or may not know the background of the word, but let's talk about how story can help connect the dots between things that people may have a surface understanding with to things that they have a deeper understanding with, so that they can increase their understanding of the thing that they have a surface level understanding of, if that makes sense. So let's talk about how story helps connect dots.
Yeah, I my belief, and this is backed by science and years of history, but my ultimate belief is, which this may feel a little bit disrupt for some people, but I think all communication is story. And I believe we process all things, metabolize all information with story. So a simple, I'll give you a couple simple stories or micro stories. When a kid, I have a 6-year-old son, when he shows up to the playground and he sees groups of friends that are playing certain games or things, and he's invited into one of those, in his head, being invited is a story. Do I want to play? Do I like these kids? Have we had fun before? So he connects the dots of the decision he's going to make, the action he's going to take, based upon the story that he has in his head of these people. Now, all they said was, hey, Carmichael, come play. But dots wise, same with our customer. Our customer, when they hear Mike Simmons, or they hear Chris Watson, or they see a video, or they see a website, they have a lot of stories that go in their head. Oh, he's got a cool whiteboard and it's got a number sign on the back, or he's got Michael Jordan in the back. If this video ever plays, it's the kind of things we have in our background. I put a lot of stuff on my background because I want a story to come out, because I'm looking for alignment. I believe stories is all about alignment, because I think that's why we communicate. We communicate with people to get alignment. Now, there are both intentional storytellers, but there's also intentional stories and unintentional stories. When I show up in a flat bill hat and a hoodie and high tops, I would love to say that there are no stories with that. There are, especially when you're 40. I just turned 40. When I show up that way, man, there are a lot of stories going through that person's head that I never told. It's what we would call what? First impression. Well, I really think it's the first stories that we ever give them. So I believe that we communicate, metabolize all information in story form. Now, people can argue with that. I don't care, but it's what we've done. If you look back in history, we would metabolize things that were going on as, say, cavemen, and we did what? Well, we drew pictures to tell the story. Then my second point I would say is to what you said, connecting the dots, is I believe we're all storytellers. Now, hear me out. I don't think we're all good storytellers. We're not intentional storytellers, but I think everyone is telling stories. When I spend any time overhearing what's going on in a coffee shop, people are telling stories. They're telling stories about their business, telling stories about their life, telling stories about their pain, telling stories about their problems, telling stories about politics. Fill in the blank. It's all storytelling. And that would be my major rub with what I do, is I get tired. I get tired's probably not the right word, but my skin crawls a little bit, Mike, when people are like, hey, let me help you become a storyteller. I want to teach you how to be a storyteller. Because I'm like, no, you already are a storyteller. Those aren't the skills that make a great storyteller. I want to teach you how to be a storyteller. No. I want to know the skills that it takes to be a compelling storyteller.
So what are some skills that we screw up when it comes to being an intentional storyteller?
Number one, we fail at being a great story listener. So I posted a LinkedIn post recently, and I don't know if you've seen it. And this will date this episode. I apologize, but we're doing this on the back end of LeBron James becoming the all-time point leader. And if
Yes.
you saw the picture, you had Phil Knight and some woman above him, one row. Don't know who that woman is, but you have Phil Knight, the CEO, the founder of Nike, who has no cell phone out. Then you have everyone else in the crowd with a big cell phone held up. Now, I posted this and said, Phil Knight's the best story listener in this moment. He is all in. He's taking in everything that's going on. And if we applied that to, me listening to you, to your story, to the new dog, to you going out and golfing, to you spending time, with beautiful sunsets, the things you appreciate. I try to listen to your story. Now that's through pictures, that's through words, that's through when I scroll on Twitter and Mike says, "Why is that?" to people's tweets, and it like puts them on the spot to then have to go deep. That's story listening, so that when I talk to you and I say something like, "Mike, I love the questions you're asking. I don't know if I'm a good story, dude. You're a great storyteller. You're a great," because I'm trying to align with you. So number one skill, story listening. We fail to listen to other people's stories, especially in this era where we want to run our mouths all the time. So that would be number one.
That is awesome. And when you think about listening and getting better at listening to story, listening to other stories, engaging in those so that you can absorb those. And Chris, thank you for following me on Twitter, because you just provided a great summary of what it's like to follow me on Twitter. That's it. And it's in a nutshell. And why do we struggle with listening?
I would say there's three things that come to mind. I would say first one is culture. We are in a culture now where we are creating tools, technology, spaces, build your brand, tell your story. We want to hear stories. Come here and share.
Yeah.
So it's really, I guess we could go as far as egocentric, but it's just very me centric. And so we have this, we have this culture shift. And so people are like, well, tell me about you. What do you want to do? It's almost like we've taken, when I was raised, the most selfish years of your life was really your childhood. Where do you want to go to school? Where do you want to eat? What do you want to be when you grow up? It's like selfish. You. But we've almost taken that, and now we're like, hey, even if you're 33, what do you want to be? How do you want to grow this year? What do you want to say? So because of that, you get a lot of people that are just telling, talking. So that's number one. Number two, the other thing I would say is that and we train salespeople on this. We ask salespeople, do you actually care about the person you're talking to and what they want and need? Or do you just care about telling them your feature, your function, your benefit, your value prop?
Yeah.
So I would say we struggle with intention versus execution. Our execution typically comes out like, I'm Chris Watson, and let me tell you all these really great things I can do and why I'm so great. Andy Raskin, kind of the godfather of strategic narrative, he calls it the arrogant doctor. The doctor that has all the licenses on there, and he just wants to tell you how great he is. So I think we struggle with it because of that. And then number three, and we talked about this pre-show, I just really feel like people prop their lives in a highlight reel on social media, and even just in real life, probably, that people feel compelled because maybe they're dealing with an identity crisis or insecurity to make sure to tell you, hey, I'm doing great, and these things are great, and I love these things. And so then we basically feel the need to talk way more than genuinely listen. We don't see I'm going to be honest, we don't see the value. Why do I care? Why do I really care about what's new in Mike's world if I only care so that I get to talk?
So you're saying that social media might be just a highlight reel for
Hey, oh,
people
100%. Mike, I used to coach high school athletes and college athletes, and we built highlight reels on Huddle. Well, do you think we showed the moments where, he couldn't tackle, the moment where he missed the shot, the PK. No, we didn't show that. We showed highlight reel. Do you think? And so here's what's funny. People now are like, let's be vulnerable. Well, yeah, you're really showing up vulnerably. No, you're showing up a highlight reel of your vulnerability so that you can, man, he's a great dad. Man, he's a great husband. Man, look. So for me, it's just not a lot of genuineness, in social, which I'll add this on and we can shut this down and run on it, which is why I think we're seeing the growth in Mastermind, Patreon, a dark social,
Yeah.
because it's a place we can show up ourselves and still feel protected because we're around other like-minded people to say, I don't know how to do billing, I suck at it. But you're never going to post that.
Well, imagine if you got a huddle video, just a compilation of so huddle is a tool that coaches will use, players will use, athletes will use to share clips of plays that they play in. And to Chris's point, you don't show the one where you get beat. Now, imagine though, if you showed the one where you screwed up and then showed the following play where you laid somebody out,
Yep.
or you missed a throw and then the following play you nailed the throw. And what kind of resilience does that demonstrate to somebody
Yeah.
when you're able to recover from the challenge? Yet nobody does that. And there's a number of reasons why nobody does it, because it's easy enough to clip. If you're not listening, you're not absorbing everything, it's easy enough for you to just turn things off after you see the mistake. So I wonder what would happen if you showed a bad play and then what happened on the next play, how that might impact how people respond to some of those videos.
Yeah, I mean, it tells a story,
yeah,
instead of a singular narrative that I am the greatest defensive back in the state of Texas. And what's ironic is when recruiting goes on, isn't that what they're asking? What's your mental toughness? What's your fortitude? What's your mindset? It might show it better to say, here's game 1. Now let me show you the whole story up to game 8 and how I could never cover a tight end, and now I can in game 7, which isn't that what you want in an athlete that can learn a playbook and learn how to, but it's just not, people fall in line with what the narrative was before. If I've always heard terrible salespeople that call me and sell, and I'm like, man, these are awful, then I probably shy away from cold calling and selling, because the only narrative I have of salespeople is the ones I've experienced.
Right. Yeah. Well, so you've used 2 words that start with I. One of them is intentional, and I want to get back to the intentional piece at some point. But the one I really want to get back to is this whole idea of inviting people in. So when it comes to inviting people into a story, I'm going to ask 2 questions, which is going to make this a little bit rough, but I'd like you to go deep on this. What happens when you think about it in the context of inviting people into a story, the story that you're creating, versus having people invite you into their story, the story or narrative that they're creating, good or bad, whether they're a professional storyteller or not. As you said, we're all storytellers. We need to improve. We can improve those skills. How do you look at the difference between inviting people into your story versus getting people to invite you into their story?
Yeah. First, I would say it's really dependent on audience. That's the first thing I would say. So
Okay.
what everyone hears me say, this may not apply for a subordinate on your team. It would be different if they were an employee, or if maybe they're a buyer, they're a new customer looking at our website. So that's first thing. But the very first thing I would say about any of this is context is ace. It's not king, it's ace. It is the most valuable thing. All right. If I went and tried to watch, I don't know, Squid Games in episode 4, I would have no clue what was going on in this weird game show on Netflix, right? If I tried to watch or tune into Mike's story in chapter 9, I might be able to pick some things up, but like what happened 1 through 8 in his journey at Catalyst. So that's the first thing is I have to as quickly as possible give context. All right. So that's the first thing. Number two, life is about reciprocation. Not a big math geek, but I remember a little bit about reciprocation. But I think body language reciprocated, tonality reciprocated, smiling reciprocated. So almost always when someone invites me into their story, I have to provide enough context of he is safe, he is inviting, I like him, but I try to read the situation. What are they looking for? Are they looking for growth? Are they looking for support? And I mean, I do this honestly with even when a company hires me, it's the first thing